The first time I met Thomas Whitmore, he threw a glass of water at my head. He was a 34-year-old billionaire who just lost the use of his legs in a car accident, and I was Maria Santos, a 26-year-old nurse from a small town in rural Montana who'd never even been on an airplane before coming to New York City to take care of him. I had no idea that this angry, broken man would change my life completely, or that saving him would mean fighting against someone who wanted to destroy everything he'd built. Before I start, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing where my story reaches. Let me explain how I ended up here. My name is Maria, and 3 months ago, I was working at a small clinic in my hometown, population 5,000. Everyone knows everyone. Life is simple, quiet, safe. I'd been a nurse for 4 years, took care of elderly patients mostly, changed bandages, administered medications, held hands when people were scared. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and I was good at it. Then, one day, my nursing school professor called me, Dr. Helena. She'd moved to New York years ago and worked at one of those fancy private hospitals where celebrities and rich people go. Maria, I have an opportunity for you. A patient who needs full-time home care. The pay is incredible. 6 months contract, maybe longer. How incredible? I asked. She told me the number. I nearly dropped the phone. It was more than I made in 2 years at the clinic. What's the catch? The patient is difficult, very difficult. He's had 5 nurses in the past 2 months. All of them quit. Difficult how? He's angry, depressed, refuses to cooperate with physical therapy, verbally abusive sometimes. He was in a car accident that left him paralyzed from the waist down. He's not adjusting well. I thought about my mother back home, about the medical bills from her surgery last year that we were still paying off, about my younger brother who wanted to go to college but we couldn't afford it. I'll do it, I said. Maria, are you sure? New York is very different from... I'm sure. When do I start? 1 week later, I was on a bus to New York City, my first time leaving Montana, my first time seeing a city with more than 1 million people. Everything was so big, so loud, so fast. Dr. Helena met me at the bus station, drove me to the Whitmore mansion in one of those neighborhoods where the houses hide behind high walls and security gates. Upper East Side, she called it. Remember, she said as we pulled up to the entrance, Thomas is going through something traumatic. He was an athlete, ran marathons, climbed mountains. His whole identity was wrapped up in being physical, being active. Now he can't walk. He's grieving the life he lost. I understand. Be patient with him. Don't take the anger personally. And Maria, don't quit. He needs consistency. He needs someone who won't give up on him. The mansion was like something from a movie. Marble floors, high ceilings, art on the walls that probably cost more than my childhood home. A staff of people who barely looked at me as I walked through. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, showed me to Thomas's room on the first floor. They'd converted a study into a bedroom since he couldn't use the stairs anymore. Good luck, she whispered before knocking on the door. Something in her tone made me nervous. What? A voice shouted from inside. Mrs. Chen opened the door and I walked in. Thomas Whitmore was sitting in a wheelchair by the window, looking out at the garden. He didn't turn around. Another one? He said. How long do you think this one will last, Mrs. Chen? I give her 3 days. Mr. Whitmore, this is Maria Santos. I don't care who she is. Tell her to leave. Mrs. Chen looked apologetically and left before closing the door. I stood there for a moment, taking in the room. Medical equipment, a hospital bed that looked untouched, medication bottles lined up on a table, and Thomas sitting rigid in that wheelchair, still not looking at me. Hi, I'm Maria. I'm going to be taking care of you. I don't need anyone to take care of me. Your doctor says otherwise. My doctor can go to hell. I walked around to face him. He was handsome in that way rich people are. Good haircut, expensive clothes, even though he was just sitting at home. But his face was hard, angry. His jaw was clenched and his eyes were cold. Look, I said, I came a long way to be here. I'm not going to leave just because you're rude. So we can do this the easy way or the hard way. He stared at me. The easy way? You cooperate. Do your exercises, take your medication. Let me help you. We get through this professionally. And the hard way? I make you cooperate, and I'm very stubborn. I grew up on a ranch. I've dealt with animals bigger and meaner than you. For a second, I thought I saw the corner of his mouth twitch, almost like he wanted to smile. But then the coldness came back. Get out, he said. No. I said get out. And I said no. Now, have you eaten lunch? Mrs. Chen said you've been skipping meals. He grabbed the glass of water from the table next to him and threw it. I ducked. The glass shattered against the wall behind me. Water dripped down onto the expensive carpet. Next time, I won't miss. I walked over to the table and picked up his medication schedule. You're supposed to take these at noon. It's already 1 o'clock. I'm not taking anything. Yes, you are. Who do you think you are? You can't tell me what to do. I pulled up a chair and sat down across from him, looked him right in the eyes. You're right. I can't make you do anything, but here's what I know. You're in pain. Physical pain from the accident, emotional pain from losing your mobility. You're angry and scared and you don't know how to deal with it, so you're pushing everyone away because that feels safer than letting people see you're struggling. His expression changed for a moment. Something vulnerable flickered across his face. But pushing people away isn't going to make the pain stop. It's just going to make you lonely, and eventually it's going to make your condition worse. Those exercises your physical therapist prescribed, they're not optional. If you don't do them, your muscles will atrophy, your condition will deteriorate, you'll lose even more independence. I don't have any independence, he said bitterly. Not yet, but you could, with work, with physical therapy, with time. Or you can sit here feeling sorry for yourself and waste away. Your choice. He was quiet for a long moment. Why do you care? Because it's my job, and because I've seen what happens when people give up. It's not pretty. You're young, you have resources, you have a chance to adapt and build a new life. A lot of people in your situation don't have those advantages. You don't know anything about my situation. You're right. So tell me. And then, to my surprise, he did.
He told me about the accident. He'd been driving home from a business meeting in Manhattan. A delivery truck ran a red light, hit his car on the driver's side. He remembered the impact, the spinning, the moment he realized he couldn't feel his legs. He told me about waking up in the hospital, the doctors explaining that his spinal cord was damaged, that he'd likely never walk again, that his life, as he knew it, was over. He told me about his company, Whitmore Technologies, a software firm he'd built from nothing, how his business partner, Richard Chen, had been running things while he recovered, how he felt useless, powerless, like everything he'd worked for was slipping away. By the time he finished talking, an hour had passed. His anger had faded into exhaustion. "Will you take your medication now?" I asked gently. He nodded. I prepared his pills and brought them to him with a fresh glass of water. He took them without complaint. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "about the glass. I could have hurt you. But you didn't, and we're going to establish a rule right now. You can be angry, you can yell, you can complain, but no throwing anything. Deal?" "Deal." "Good. Now, let's get some food in you, and then we'll talk about your physical therapy schedule." That was the first day. It didn't get easier immediately. Thomas had good days and bad days. Days where he cooperated and days where he fought me on everything. But I didn't quit. I stayed patient. I learned what worked with him. Directness, honesty, not treating him like he was fragile or helpless. Slowly, over weeks, he started to change. Started doing his exercises, started taking his medication on time, started eating proper meals. And somewhere in there, we started talking, really talking, about his life before the accident, about my life in Montana, about books and movies and what we wanted from the future. I learned that Thomas wasn't the cold, angry man I'd first met. He was someone who'd had his entire identity stripped away and was trying to figure out who he was now. He was scared, grieving, but underneath all that, he was kind, funny, intelligent. And I started to realize I was looking forward to our conversations, to the way his face lit up when he made progress in physical therapy, to the rare moments when he laughed at something I said. I was falling for him, which was stupid, completely, utterly stupid. He was a billionaire. I was a nurse from rural Montana. He lived in a mansion on the Upper East Side. I shared a bedroom with 2 other nurses in a tiny apartment in Queens. We were from completely different worlds. Besides, he was my patient. It was inappropriate, unprofessional, all the things Dr. Helena had warned me about on my first day. So I kept my feelings to myself, did my job, maintained boundaries. But it got harder every day, especially when I noticed the way he looked at me sometimes, like I was the only real thing in his carefully constructed world. 2 months into my contract, Thomas had a visitor, his business partner, Richard Chen. I was helping Thomas with his afternoon exercises when Richard walked in without knocking. He was tall, polished, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. "Thomas," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "looking good. The nurse is actually getting you to work. Impressive." "Maria," I said. "My name is Maria." Richard barely glanced at me. "Right, Maria. Could you give us a moment? Business to discuss." I looked at Thomas. He nodded. "It's fine. I'll call if I need you." I left the room, but I didn't go far. Something about Richard made me uncomfortable. The way he'd dismissed me, the way he'd looked at Thomas, like he was assessing a situation rather than visiting a friend. I could hear their voices through the door. Not the words, but the tone. Richard's voice was smooth, persuasive. Thomas's voice was uncertain, questioning. The conversation lasted maybe 20 minutes. When Richard left, he walked past me in the hallway without acknowledging I existed. I went back into Thomas's room. He was staring out the window again, that distant look on his face that he got when something was bothering him. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Richard wants me to sign some papers, transfer more control of the company to him temporarily, until I'm back on my feet." Something in my gut clenched. "Do you trust him?" "He's my partner. We built the company together. Of course I trust him." But something felt off. The way he was pushing, saying I need to focus on recovery and not worry about business, that he'll handle everything. What do you want to do? I don't know. Maybe he's right. Maybe I should focus on getting better and let him run things. I sat down across from him. "Thomas, can I be honest?" "Always." I don't trust him. I can't explain why, but something about the way he looked at you, the way he talked, it felt wrong. You met him 5 minutes. I know, and maybe I'm wrong, but just be careful. Don't sign anything without reading it carefully. Maybe have a lawyer look at it first? He smiled, a real smile. "You're very protective of me." "It's my job." "Is that all it is? Your job?" The way he asked it, the way he was looking at me, my heart started racing. "Thomas, because sometimes it feels like more than that, like you care about me, not as a patient, but as a person." I should have denied it, should have maintained professional boundaries, should have done a lot of things. Instead, I told the truth. "I do care about you, more than I should, but you're my patient, and I'm just the nurse from Montana. This," I jested between us, "this can't happen." "Why not?" "Because you're Thomas Whitmore, billionaire, and I'm Maria Santos, nobody." He pulled his chair closer to me, reached out, and took my hand. "You're not nobody. You're the person who didn't give up on me when everyone else did. You're the person who sees me as Thomas, not as the guy in the wheelchair. You're the person who makes me want to get better." "Thomas, I'm falling for you, Maria. I have been for weeks. I tried not to, tried to tell myself it was just gratitude or loneliness or some kind of transference, but it's not. It's real." My eyes filled with tears. This is so complicated. I know, but maybe complicated is okay. Maybe we don't have to figure it all out right now. Maybe we just see where this goes. He was still holding my hand. His thumb was tracing circles on my palm. It was the most intimate thing anyone had ever done for me. Okay, I whispered. We'll see where this goes. He pulled me closer, and then he kissed me. It was gentle, sweet, full of promise and possibility, and all the things I'd been trying not to feel. When we pulled apart, we were both smiling. So, he said, does this mean you're not going to make me do my exercises today? I laughed. Nice try. Get on the mat. 20 reps. Let's go. He groaned, but he was still smiling, and for the first time since the accident, there was hope in his eyes. Real hope. I didn't know then that everything was about to fall apart, that Richard's visit wasn't just about business, that there were things happening behind the scenes that would threaten everything Thomas had built. I didn't know that falling for Thomas would put me in the middle of a corporate war. I just knew that for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, even if it was complicated, even if it was scary, even if I had no idea what I was doing. I was falling in love with Thomas Whitmore, and he was falling in love with me. Everything else we'd figure out together.
The next few weeks were like living in a dream. Thomas and I kept our relationship quiet, not because we were ashamed, but because we wanted to protect it. Keep it just ours for a little while before the world complicated everything. He was making incredible progress in physical therapy. His upper body strength had improved dramatically. He could transfer himself from the wheelchair to the bed without help now. Small victories that meant everything. We'd have breakfast together every morning. I'd make coffee the way my mother taught me, and Thomas would complain it was too weak, but drink every drop. We'd talk about everything and nothing. He'd tell me about growing up wealthy but lonely in Connecticut. I'd tell him about growing up poor but surrounded by family in Montana. Our worlds were so different, but somehow we fit. Mrs. Chen knew something had changed. She'd smile at me when I'd laugh at something Thomas said, when I'd stay in his room longer than necessary, talking instead of just doing my nursing duties. "You're good for him," she told me one day while I was preparing his lunch. "He's different now, lighter. I haven't seen him smile this much since before the accident." "He's just making progress," I said, trying to sound casual. Progress." She gave me a knowing look. "Just be careful, dear. The world he lives in, it's not always kind to people like us." I knew what she meant. Mrs. Chen had worked for wealthy families her whole life. She understood the invisible lines, the unspoken rules. But I chose to believe love could cross those lines, that Thomas and I could make it work despite everything. I was naive, but I was also happy, and I hadn't been truly happy in a very long time. Then, Richard started showing up more frequently. At first, it was once a week, then twice. Then he was there almost every other day, always with papers for Thomas to sign, always with urgent business matters that couldn't wait. "What does Richard keep wanting?" I asked after a particularly long meeting. "Just business stuff, company decisions that need approval." "Can't he email you documents? Why does he need to come here in person so often?" "He says it's better to discuss things face to face." "Thomas, I really don't trust him." "Maria, I know you're worried, but Richard has been my partner for 8 years. We built this company together in a loft in Brooklyn. He's not trying to hurt me." "Then why do you look so stressed after every meeting with him?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because he keeps reminding me that I can't run the company from a wheelchair, that clients are nervous, that I need to step back and let him handle things." "That's not true. You're perfectly capable of running your company. You're doing everything from here already. The video calls, the emails, the strategy meetings. But I can't go to the office in Midtown, can't meet clients in person, can't do the things I used to do.
So what? You adapt. You find new ways to do things. That doesn't mean you hand control over to someone else. He wheeled over to the window. Maybe he's right. Maybe I should step back, focus on recovery, let Richard run things for a while. Is that what you want? Or is that what he's convincing you to want? Before he could answer, his phone rang. It was Richard. I left the room to give him privacy, but as I walked away, I heard Thomas say something that made my blood run cold. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. The papers you brought last week. Transferring controlling interest until I'm back on my feet. It makes sense. I'll probably sign them next time you come by. Controlling interest. That meant Richard would own more than 50% of the company, would have final say on all decisions, could essentially push Thomas out of his own company if he wanted. I needed to do something. But what? I was just a nurse. I didn't understand business or contracts or corporate politics, but I knew someone who might. My older brother Lucas was a lawyer back in Montana. Not a corporate lawyer, but he understood contracts. I called him that night from my tiny apartment in Queens. "Maria, it's late. Is everything okay?" "I need your help. It's about my patient. His business partner is trying to get him to sign papers transferring controlling interest in his company." "That's a huge decision. Does your patient understand what he's signing?" "I don't think so. He's been recovering from an accident. He's vulnerable. And this partner keeps pushing him, saying he needs to focus on recovery and not worry about business." That's a classic manipulation tactic. Isolate someone when they're weak, convince them they can't handle their responsibilities, then take control. That's what I thought. But how do I prove it? How do I get Thomas to see what's happening? You need to see those papers. If there's anything suspicious in them, any clauses that would permanently transfer power or make it difficult for your patient to regain control, that would be evidence of bad intent. How am I supposed to get the papers? I'm just his nurse. You're also someone who cares about him. Find a way, Maria, before it's too late. After we hung up, I sat in my tiny room staring at the ceiling. How was I supposed to get those papers? I couldn't just ask Thomas to show me confidential business documents. He'd think I was overstepping. But I had to do something. The next day, Richard came by again. He was there for over 2 hours. When he finally left, he was smiling. Thomas looked exhausted. I went into his room with his afternoon medications. "How was the meeting?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Fine. Richard brought the final version of the papers. I'm going to sign them tomorrow." "Tomorrow? That's fast." "He says we need to file them quickly, some deadline with the board or something." Red flags were going off in my head. "Can I ask what the papers say?" "It's complicated. Basically, Richard gets controlling interest in the company temporarily until I'm able to return to full-time work. Then we'll revisit the arrangement." "And how is able to return defined?" "What?" "In the papers, how do they define when you're recovered enough to take back control?" He frowned. "I don't know. Richard explained it, but honestly, it was a lot of legal language. I trust him to have written it fairly." "Thomas, please, before you signed anything, have another lawyer look at it, someone independent, just to make sure—" "Maria, I appreciate your concern, but this is my business decision. Richard is my partner. I trust him." "Then let me read the papers. I'm not a lawyer, but my brother is. I can send him photos and he can review them quickly. If everything is fine, you sign tomorrow like you planned. But if there's anything wrong—" "There won't be anything wrong." "Then you have nothing to lose by letting me check." He sighed. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No." "Fine. The papers are on your desk. You can look at them after dinner. But Maria, when you see that everything is legitimate, I don't want to hear any more about this." "Deal." That evening, after Thomas went to bed, I took photos of every page of the contract, sent them to Lucas with a message. "Emergency. Need you to review these tonight." He called me back at midnight. "Maria, this contract is a trap." "What do you mean?" The clause about returning control, it's not based on your patient's physical recovery, it's based on him being able to work in the office full-time for 6 consecutive months. Plus, there's a clause that says if the company's value decreases by more than 15% during the transition period, the arrangement becomes permanent. Permanent? Meaning Richard would keep controlling interest forever. And here's the thing, 15% is not hard to make happen if you're the one controlling the company. Bad decisions, delayed projects, lost clients. He could tank the value just enough to trigger that clause. So Thomas would lose his company? Exactly. This isn't a temporary arrangement. It's a hostile takeover disguised as helping a friend. I felt sick. What do I do? Stop him from signing. Show him what I found. If he still doesn't believe you, hire a corporate lawyer to review it. But Maria, do not let him sign those papers tomorrow. I didn't sleep that night. I rehearsed what I'd say to Thomas, how to explain this without making it sound like I'd gone behind his back. The next morning, I went to his room early. He was already awake, sitting at his desk with the contract in front of him. Thomas, we need to talk. Not about the contract again, Maria. Yes, about the contract. I had my brother review it. He's a lawyer. Thomas, this isn't what Richard told you it is. He turned his wheelchair to face me. You did what? I took photos of the contract and sent them to Lucas. And Thomas, there are clauses in there that could make you lose control of your company permanently. You went behind my back. Because I was worried, and I was right to be worried. The clause about returning control, it's not based on your physical recovery, it's based on you working in the office full-time for 6 consecutive months, which you can't do from a wheelchair unless your office building is accessible. And there's another clause about company value that... Enough. His voice was cold. You had no right to do that. Those are confidential business documents. Thomas, please, just listen. No, you listen. You're my nurse, not my lawyer, not my business advisor. This is completely inappropriate. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need you to do your job and stay out of my personal business. I felt like I'd been slapped. Fine, but before you sign anything, at least get a second opinion from your own lawyer. Not mine, yours. I'll do what I want. Now please leave. I need to get ready for Richard's visit. I left his room with tears in my eyes. Mrs. Chen saw me in the hallway. What happened? I tried to help. He thinks I overstepped. She put her hand on my arm. Give him time. He's scared. When people are scared, they lash out at the people trying to help them. He'll come around. But I wasn't sure he would, and if he signed those papers, there might not be a way to undo it. Richard arrived an hour later. I stayed in my room, listening, waiting, praying that Thomas would at least pause, get a second opinion, do anything except sign. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, I heard Richard leave. I gave it a few more minutes, then went to Thomas's room. He was sitting at his desk, staring at the unsigned contract. You didn't sign it, I said quietly. No, I didn't. Why not? He turned to look at me. His eyes were red. Because I called my lawyer, the one who handled my company formation years ago in Manhattan, asked him to review the contract Richard brought. And you were right. About all of it. The clauses, the trap. My lawyer said if I'd signed this, I would have effectively given away my company with almost no way to get it back. I felt relief wash over me. Thomas, you tried to tell me, you warned me, and I yelled at you for it. Maria, I'm so sorry. It's okay. You were scared. You didn't want to believe someone you trusted could betray you like that. What do I do now? Richard is expecting me to sign. When I don't, he'll know something is wrong. Then we need a plan. We need to figure out how to protect your company before he makes another move. Thomas looked at me. Really looked at me. We? Of course we. You think I'm going to let some corporate shark steal your company? Not happening. For the first time that day, he smiled. How did I get so lucky to have you? I'm just stubborn. Remember? I told you on day one that I don't give up easily. He reached for my hand. I love you, Maria. I should have said it before, but I was scared. Scared of what it meant. Scared of how vulnerable it made me. But I love you. My heart felt like it might burst. I love you too, even when you're being stubborn and refusing to listen to me. He laughed, a real laugh. Then he pulled me closer and kissed me. Okay, he said when we broke apart. Let's figure out how to save my company. Together. I had no idea what we were doing. I was a nurse, not a businesswoman. But I knew Thomas, knew he was smart and capable, and I knew I'd do whatever it took to help him, even if it meant going up against someone as powerful and ruthless as Richard, because that's what you do when you love someone. You fight for them, even when it's scary, even when you're in over your head. You fight. Over the next few days, Thomas and I became partners in a way I never expected. Not just romantically, but strategically. He taught me about his company, about the board of directors, about corporate structure. I helped him see clearly, think through scenarios, plan his next moves. We decided not to confront Richard immediately. Instead, Thomas would play along, act like he was still considering signing the papers. Meanwhile, we'd gather evidence of what Richard had been doing. Thomas started reviewing files he'd been ignoring during his recovery, emails, financial reports, board meeting minutes that Richard had been sending him, but he barely glanced at. What we found was worse than we'd imagined. Richard had been systematically undermining Thomas for months, actually since before the accident. He'd been meeting with the board members privately, suggesting Thomas was losing his edge, that he was too focused on adventure sports and personal pursuits instead of the company. Then the accident happened, and Richard saw his opportunity. He'd been the one feeding the narrative to clients that Thomas couldn't run the company in a wheelchair. He'd been the one suggesting to the board that they needed to make changes. He'd been positioning himself as the natural successor while Thomas was at his most vulnerable. I can't believe I didn't see it, Thomas said one evening as we reviewed documents. All those meetings with the board that he said were routine, all those client conversations he said went well. He was poisoning everyone against me. He's been planning this for a long time, I said, which means we need to be smarter. We can't just tell the board what he's been doing. They might not believe you. They might think you're being paranoid because of the accident. So what do? We need proof, hard evidence that he's been acting against the company's interests. Then we take it to the board and let them decide. Thomas's lawyer, Michael, came over the next day. He was older, experienced, with the kind of calm confidence that made you trust him immediately. His office was in a high-rise in Lower Manhattan. What Richard did with that contract borders on fraud, Michael said after we explained everything, but proving he intended to harm Thomas rather than help the company is difficult. We need more than just a bad contract. What kind of more? I asked. Emails, conversations, anything showing he knew Thomas could run the company but was deliberately undermining him, or evidence that he was planning to profit personally from taking control. Thomas pulled up his laptop. I have access to all the company emails, including Richard's. That's legally questionable, Michael warned. It's my company, my email server. If I want to review my employees' communications, that's my right. Michael nodded. Then let's start looking. We spent the next week going through years of emails. It was tedious work. Thomas would read during the day while I did my nursing duties. Then in the evenings, we'd review what he'd found together. Most of it was boring corporate stuff, but slowly a pattern emerged. Richard had been communicating with a venture capital firm. The emails were vague, but it was clear they were discussing some kind of deal, a merger or acquisition, something that would require Richard to have controlling interest in the company. He's trying to sell, Thomas said, staring at the screen. That's what this is about. He wants control so he can sell the company to this VC firm, probably negotiate himself a huge payout in the process. Can he do that, even with controlling interest? Technically, yes, if he has enough board support, and from these emails, it looks like he's been working on getting that support for months. So he gets you to sign over control, sells the company, makes millions, and you're left with nothing. Worse than nothing, I'd still be part owner, but with no control. I'd watch him dismantle everything I built and not be able to stop it. I felt rage building in my chest. This man had pretended to be Thomas's friend, his partner, all while planning to steal everything. "We need to take this to the board," I said. "Not yet," Michael advised. "We need more. These emails are suggestive, but not conclusive. Richard could claim he was exploring options for the company's benefit. We need something that clearly shows he was acting in his own interest against Thomas's." That something came 2 days later. Thomas received an email from one of his biggest clients, Anderson Technologies, based in Boston. They were canceling their contract. The email was polite but firm. They felt Whitmore Technologies wasn't the right fit anymore. They'd be moving to a competitor. "This doesn't make sense," Thomas said. "Anderson has been with us for 6 years. We have an excellent relationship. Why would they suddenly cancel?" He called the CEO directly. I sat next to him during the call, listening. "David, it's Thomas Whitmore. I just got your cancellation notice. Can you tell me what happened?" There was a pause. Then, "Thomas, I'm sorry. I tried to push back, but Richard convinced our board it was the right move." "Richard? My Richard?" "He reached out a few weeks ago, said Whitmore Technologies was going through changes, that you were stepping back due to health issues, that the company's direction was uncertain. He suggested Anderson might want to lock in a better rate with a more stable provider, even recommended a competitor." Thomas's face went pale. "He told you to leave us?" "I'm sorry, Thomas. If I had known you were still involved, still capable of running things, I would have pushed back harder. But Richard made it sound like you were basically retired." After the call, Thomas just sat there, stunned. "He's sabotaging the company," I said, "driving away clients so the value drops so he can trigger that clause in the contract." "If I had signed those papers," Thomas said slowly, "and the company lost 15% of its value, Richard would have gotten permanent control. Then he could sell to the VC firm at a reduced price, pocket his share, and leave me with scraps." "That's criminal," Michael said. He'd been listening from across the room. "That's not just bad business. That's intentional destruction of company value for personal gain." "Can we prove it?" "Those emails to Anderson's CEO. If Richard put anything in writing about you stepping back or the company being unstable, that's evidence of sabotage." Thomas called David back. "I need a favor. Do you have any emails or written communication from Richard about Whitmore Technologies? Anything he said about the company or about me?" David forwarded them within an hour. And there it was, Richard's own words, telling Anderson that Thomas was permanently impaired and unable to fulfill his leadership duties, that the company was in transition and couldn't guarantee the same level of service. All lies, all deliberately calculated to drive away business. "This is enough," Michael said. "This shows intentional sabotage. Combined with the contract and the VC firm emails, we can prove Richard was acting against company interest for personal gain." "So what do we do?" I asked. "We call an emergency board meeting, present this evidence, and vote to remove Richard as partner." Thomas looked at Michael. "Can we do that?" "If you have board support, yes, but we need to move fast. If Richard suspects what we're doing, he'll make his move first." Thomas spent the next 2 days reaching out to board members individually, explaining what happened, showing them the evidence, building support. Some were shocked. Some admitted they'd had concerns about Richard but hadn't spoken up. Some were skeptical until they saw the emails. But by the time Thomas was done, he had the votes. 6 of the 9 board members supported removing Richard. The emergency meeting was called for Friday morning. Richard didn't know what it was about. Thomas had told him it was a routine quarterly review. That Friday, I helped Thomas get ready. He wore a suit for the first time since the accident. He looked like himself again, strong, confident, in control. "You've got this," I told him as his car service arrived. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "Thomas, I'm your nurse. I can't go to a board meeting."
You're not just my nurse, you're my partner. You helped me figure this out. You saved my company. I want you there." So I went, wearing the nicest dress I owned, which was probably still too casual for a corporate boardroom, but Thomas didn't care. He held my hand as we rode to the office. The Whitmore Technologies building was in Midtown Manhattan, sleek glass and steel. A receptionist who clearly knew Thomas greeted him warmly, seeming genuinely happy to see him back. The boardroom was on the top floor. 8 people were already there when we arrived, and Richard. He stood when he saw Thomas, started to smile, then saw me, saw Michael, saw Thomas's expression. The smile faded. "Thomas, what's this about?" "Have a seat, Richard. We need to talk." What followed was the most intense 2 hours of my life. Thomas presented the evidence methodically, the contract with its trap clauses, the emails to the VC firm, the sabotage of client relationships, Richard's lies about Thomas's capacity to run the company. Richard tried to defend himself, claimed he was protecting the company, that Thomas wasn't capable of leading anymore, that his actions were necessary. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the board had made their decision before walking into the room. By the end of the meeting, Richard was out, removed as partner, removed from the board, escorted from the building by security. He looked at Thomas one last time before leaving. "You'll regret this. You can't run this company from a wheelchair. You'll fail without me." Thomas met his eyes. "Watch me." After Richard left, the board voted to reinstate Thomas as CEO with full authority. They apologized for not seeing what was happening sooner, promised full support moving forward. Thomas gave a short speech about company values, about integrity, about how Whitmore Technologies would continue to innovate and serve clients with excellence, about how his accident hadn't changed his vision or his commitment. When we finally left the building, it was evening. Thomas looked exhausted, but triumphant. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it. You did it. I just helped. Maria, without you, I would have signed those papers. Richard would have won. You saved everything." I kissed him there in the car. We saved it together. That's how this works now. We're a team. Yeah, we are. That night, back at the mansion, Mrs. Chen made a celebration dinner. Just the 3 of us. She'd worked for Thomas for years and was genuinely happy to see him win. "To Maria," Thomas said, raising his glass, "the most stubborn, brilliant, beautiful woman I've ever met, who refused to give up on me when everyone else did, who saw what I couldn't see, who saved my life and my company." "To Maria," Mrs. Chen echoed. I felt tears in my eyes. "I'm just a nurse from Montana. I didn't do anything special." "You did everything special," Thomas said, "and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving to you how special you are." It sounded like a promise, like something more than just words after a victory. It sounded like forever. 6 months later, Thomas asked me to marry him. We were in the garden behind the mansion. He'd been working with a physical therapist on a new type of mobility device. Not a cure, not walking, but something that gave him more independence, more freedom. He'd planned this elaborate proposal, rose petals, candles, a string quartet that Mrs. Chen had secretly arranged. But when the moment came, he just looked at me and said, "Maria, I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" I said yes before he even finished the question. My family came to New York for the engagement party. It was the first time they'd seen where I was living, what my life had become. My mother cried when she saw the mansion. "My daughter, this is like a palace." "It's just a house, Mom. Just a house," she laughed, "with more bathrooms than our entire street back home." But she loved Thomas immediately. Everyone did. He was charming and warm and genuinely interested in hearing about their lives. He asked my father about ranching, asked my brother about his law practice, played games with my younger cousins. "He's good for you," my mother said later. "I can see it in your eyes. You're happy." "I am, but, Mom, are you okay with this? With me marrying someone so different from us?" She took my hands. "Maria, wealth doesn't make someone good or bad.
Character does. And that man has good character. He loves you, he respects you, he sees your value. That's all I want for my daughter. The wedding was 3 months later. We kept it small, just family and close friends. Thomas wanted to invite hundreds of people, business associates and society connections, but I convinced him to keep it intimate. "This day is about us," I said, "not about impressing people." So we got married in the mansion garden. I wore my grandmother's wedding dress that my mother had saved for years. Thomas wore a suit and cried when he saw me walk down the aisle. My father gave me away. Thomas's mother, who'd flown in from Connecticut, welcomed me into the family with genuine warmth. After the wedding, we honeymooned in Montana. Thomas insisted. He wanted to see where I came from, meet my extended family, experience the place that made me who I am. My town was shocked when we arrived. A billionaire in a wheelchair, staying at the local inn, eating at the corner diner, attending Sunday service at our little church. But Thomas loved it. Loved the simplicity, the community, the way everyone knew each other and looked out for each other. "This is what I want," he said one evening as we sat on my parents' porch watching the sunset. "Not the mansion, not the fancy lifestyle. This, connection, family, people who care about each other." We did have kids, 2 of them. A daughter first, Anna, named after my grandmother, then a son, Lucas, named after my brother. Thomas was an amazing father despite the wheelchair. He couldn't run around with them physically, but he was creative, built obstacle courses they could navigate together, taught them to rock climb at an accessible gym, took them camping in an adapted RV. And he made sure they understood privilege, made sure they knew how lucky they were, made sure they spent time in Montana every summer, working on my parents' ranch, understanding where their mother came from. Anna grew up bilingual, switching easily between English and Spanish. She was smart like her father, but practical like me, wanted to be a doctor, to help people. Lucas was quieter, more thoughtful. He loved technology like Thomas, but also loved nature like my family. Talked about building sustainable ranches using advanced technology. They were good kids, grounded despite the wealth they grew up with, kind despite having every advantage. Thomas rebuilt Whitmore Technologies into something even more successful than before, but he also changed its focus, started investing in accessibility technology, in programs that hired people with disabilities, in research that could help others like him. He became an advocate, spoke at conferences about disability rights, about how society needs to change its perceptions, about how wheelchair users can do anything with the right support and opportunities. And he credited me, always, in every interview, every speech. He'd say that I taught him that limitations are often just lack of creativity, that what matters isn't what you've lost, but what you choose to do with what you have. I went back to school, got my degree in healthcare administration, started working with hospitals to improve care for patients with disabilities, used my experience with Thomas to advocate for better training, better equipment, better understanding. We became partners in everything, not just marriage, but mission. We built a foundation that provided nursing care for people who couldn't afford it, funded scholarships for nursing students from rural areas, created programs that connected patients with disabilities to resources and support. 10 years after we met, Thomas and I sat in that same garden where he'd proposed. Our kids were playing nearby. Mrs. Chen, retired now, but still visiting often, was having tea on the patio. "Do you ever regret it? Leaving your simple life for all this complexity?" "Never. Do you regret throwing that glass at me on day 1? He laughed. "Every single day. I was such an ass. You were hurt and scared and going through something terrible. Still, you could have walked out, should have walked out. But I didn't because I'm too stubborn, remember?" He pulled me closer. Best character flaw ever. I thought about Maria from 10 years ago. That nervous girl on a bus to New York, that overwhelmed nurse walking into a mansion for the first time, that terrified woman falling for her patient while fighting a corporate shark. She wouldn't believe this was possible. This life, this love, this family. But it was. It was all real. And it started with one simple choice, the choice to not give up, to not walk away when things got hard, to believe that love could cross any divide if both people were willing to fight for it. Thomas had thrown a glass at me on day 1. By day 2, I'd decided he was worth fighting for. By day 90, we'd saved his company together. By day 180, we were engaged. And now, thousands of days later, we were still here, still fighting, still choosing each other, still proving that a nurse from Montana and a billionaire in a wheelchair could build something beautiful. "I love you," I said. "I love you too. Thank you for being too stubborn to give up on me." "Always," I promised. "I'll always be too stubborn to give up on you." And I meant it, because that's what love is really. Not the fairy tale version, not the easy version, but the stubborn, persistent, refusing to quit version. The version that sees someone at their worst and chooses to believe in their best. The version that fights corporate villains and skeptical families and self-doubt. The version that builds a life, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. That's the love story no one tells you about. The one without magic or destiny or fate. Just two people who decided they were worth fighting for. And fought. And won. Hit subscribe to hear more stories about love that fights back.